These are the last images that the Shah of Iran saw on the morning of January 16, 1979, on board a military helicopter for what was to be his last trip to Mehrabad International Airport. Few people understood the rationale for his decision to leave the country at such a critical juncture. The King of Kings left his Pahlavi reign and went on to die 19 months later in exile due to medical complications. His departure changed the future history of the Middle East and the world. This is the medical story of that 19-month odyssey which brought about his death. The Shah's decline from power was a classical tragedy, but the kingship bestowed upon him overnight resembled a fairy tale. His father, Reza Shah, the founder of the Pahlavi dynasty, declared neutrality in World War II and denied Iran's use as a transport corridor for the Allies. This stand instigated the Anglo-Soviet invasion and subsequent division of Iran into spheres of influence. In September 1941, Reza Shah's abdication, forced by the British, brought his 21-year-old son, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, into power. The young Shah nearly lost his symbolic reign when in 1953, the Prime Minister, Mohammad Mossadegh, nationalized Iran's oil industry and demanded autonomy from Western colonial rule. The Shah dismissed the Prime Minister, but Mossadegh refused to step aside. Fearing for his life, the young monarch fled Iran into exile in Rome. In his absence, the Iranian military, with support from the American and British intelligence services, conducted a covert operation to depose Mossadegh. Protests erupted on the streets of Tehran, leaving hundreds dead. Pro-Shah tank regiments stormed the capital and bombarded the Prime Minister's official residence. Mossadegh was arrested, and on August 22, 1953, the reluctant Shah returned to Iran. Mohammad Reza Pahlavi began his reign a timid monarch. Yet on October 26, 1967, 26 years into his reign, during an extravagant coronation ceremony, he designated himself the Shahanshah and crowned his third wife, Farah, as Shah Banu. This gave the Pahlavi dynasty exactly what it was longing for, an empress and heirs.
Shah Iran.
He pronounced himself the King of Kings. Oil income, combined with Western support, gave the Shah a false sense of comfort. Ironically, the Shah came to believe it his mission to change the world order which had placed him in power.
In the old days, you, British and others who had influence here, you could change the prime ministers as you wished. Are you sorry for that time that you have lost? Do you want the same thing? To manipulate our internal affairs? We won't let you.
Ending 20 years of U.S. aid to Iran, in 1973, President Nixon gave the Shah full discretionary power to buy almost any American weapons he desired. Nonetheless, the king's appetite for power and arms would not be satiated.
If the United States limits the supply of American weapons, will you buy weapons elsewhere?
Definitely.
The U.S. had invested a great deal in making the Shah's Iranian military regime a front line against the spread of Soviet influence in the region. Though the Shah had other agendas on his mind. In a race to transform Iran into a major world power within a single generation, he expedited a grand plan to modernize the country. By rallying Arab nations to join him in cutting output, world oil prices increased almost fivefold in 12 months. Iran's GNP expanded by the unsustainable rate of 50% per year. The Shah was unmoved by the negative impact of his policies on Western economies.
It's true that when we started to defend our interests, the price of commodities also rocketed up by several 100%. But this cannot continue. If you increase, we increase. If we increase, you increase. We have got to find some solution for this.
The oil revenue windfall financed modernization, liberalization, and expanded education of Iranian society. However, the political and intellectual awakening of the middle class meant the masses demanded more freedom from the Pahlavi government. Numerous assassination attempts on the Shah did nothing to slow this trend. As the rapid modernization continued, poor infrastructure, lack of planning, mismanagement, and corruption brought many of the Shah's plans to a halt. Average Iranians were disillusioned. The king had misjudged the oil markets, as well as his own power, as far as threatening to cancel long-standing oil contracts with Western consortiums coming due in 1979. Iran's economy was in shambles. The Pahlavi monarch was losing support at home and abroad. In 1977, the incoming US President, Jimmy Carter, put pressure on the Shah to improve the human rights situation in Iran. Opposition groups saw this as a sign to step up their pressure. They united behind a religious leader, Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, who orchestrated the revolution from exile in France by broadcasting into Iran via Western media outlets. Iran was overwhelmed by strikes and riots. The Shah made concessions to the opposition by arresting and imprisoning some of his main supporters, but the protests only grew louder. President Carter sent in NATO commander, four-star General Robert Heuser, to ensure the Iranian military stood down, paving the way for the king to leave the country and Khomeini to take his place. But what influenced the Shah to defy his US masters? And what persuaded Western powers, mainly the United States, to abandon an old familiar friend in place of political Islam? The answers surprisingly start with the Shah's illness. The prevailing story, as told by the Queen in her book An Enduring Love, contends that the Shah's cancer was first discovered by the French doctors in 1974, who kept it a secret, even from the king, having only learned of his illness at the very end, sometime around 1977.
Well, there was a lot of secrecy and even conspiracy of silence. Apparently when the Shah was on one of his vacations on the Isle of Kish water skiing, he noticed a lump in his upper left side. And I think he himself, I understand, thought it was the spleen.
The Shah shared his pain with his longtime confidant and trusted minister of court, Asadullah Alam.
یه شب ویکند علم از جزیره کیش به من تلفن کرد. شب یه ویکندی به خونه من تلفن کرد از جزیره کیش. گفت دکتر، گفت دکتر من به تو احتیاج دارم. گفتم حالتون خوبه که من 7-8 روز پیش دیده بودمش که گفت نه برای من نیست ولی من به تو احتیاج دارم. علم تو تلفن به من اون شب گفت که تو باید بگی دوستای فرانسویت بیان.
In 1974, world-famous French cancer specialist Dr. Jean Bernard and his lab technician Dr. Georges Flandrin were secretly flown into Iran to examine the Shah.
Well, when the doctors in France, the specialists, were called, they were not told that they were going to see the Shah. They thought they were being called to see the court minister, an aide to the Shah.
سر نهار به من گفتن آره برای اعلیحضرت بود، ما معاینش کردیم، چیزی پیدا نکردیم، خیلی سر حال اعلیحضرت شما، خیلی مرد قویه که حالش هم خب سوابق مالاریا داشت. من فقط از فلاندران خواهش کردم یه خونی بگیره که بریم پاریس رو مطالعه دقیق‌تری هم میکنیم.
Dr. Georges Flandrin, the Queen's medical voice on the Shah's illness, who throughout her book recounts this story via letters he supposedly sent to his mentor, Dr. Jean Bernard, claims that both French doctors made their diagnosis after looking at the Shah's blood samples under a microscope inside the marble-tiled bathroom of the palace.
After they did some blood tests, they determined it was a chronic lymphatic leukemia. But the people surrounding the Shah, the court minister, his physicians, other officials, felt that it would not be wise to disclose that at that time, even to the Shah. And they told the Shah that not that he had leukemia, which is a form of cancer of the blood, but that he had a disease called Waldenstrom's disease.
Dr. Flandrin further claims that General Ayadi, the Shah's enigmatic and obscure personal physician who was entrusted with all of his medical decisions, requested that the French doctors refer to the Shah's cancer as Waldenstrom's so that the Shah would not become alarmed at the diagnosis.
مزخرف نوشته، ابدا هم چیزی نیست، چون خود فلاندران میدونه که هم چیزی نیست، حالا این به چه دلیلی اینو نوشته نمیدونم. تشخیصی که بخواستیم نگیم همینو گفتیم تحال اعلیحضرت همایونی بزرگ شده برای که شما سوابق مالاریا دارید، این تشخیص رو بهش دادیم که خیال نکنه سرطان دارید.
A quick lookup of the word Waldenstrom's in any dictionary would have confirmed it as a type of cancer. It seems unlikely that they could have used such a trick to hide the illness from the Shah.
Now, I don't know what was in the Shah's mind. He might have suspected that he had something more serious, but he did not let on. And it was agreed by all that the public should not know anything.
But the Shah did see other doctors before the French examined him, and he knew about his illness. Why else would he specifically seek the services of a cancer specialist?
من اینو خودم اینو حقیقتا عین واقعیتی که آقای پروفسور فلینگر در 1968 اینو دیده بود و این موضوع رو به من گفت.
With a great love for skiing, the Shah made regular winter trips to Switzerland and Austria. He would also use these trips as an opportunity for secret annual visits with his primary doctor for checkups.
ماه مارس آمدن، یه جوری می اومدن که چند روزی هم می رفتن به سوئیس و بعد از اونجا به تهران برسن که برای 9 روز در تهران باشن. اعلیحضرت آمدن و رفتیم به بیمارستان پروفسور فلینگر و آقای پروفسور فلینگر البته معایناتی کردن، بعد آمدن بیرون از اتاق معاینات و با اعلیحضرت رفتن به یه اتاق دیگه که اونجا من خوندم که بالا در نوشته بود ایزوتوپن.
At the time, radioisotope technology in nuclear medicine used radiation to provide diagnostic information about specific organs or to treat various medical conditions, particularly cancer.
این یک طبیب خیلی معروف وین بود که اگر یک کسی از رؤسای ممالک میخواست بره اونجا یا هر کس مهمی میخواست بره یه طبیب معتبر رو ببینه، باید بره پیش فلینگر که البته هر کسی رو به آسونی قبول نمیکرد. و شاه ما میدونستیم که پیش فلینگر چکاپ میکنه هر سال. چکاپ سالانه رو میره پیش فلینگر میکنه. اینم میدونستیم عیاده میبره پیش فلینگر.
بعد از انقلاب من رفتم، بعد از فوت اعلیحضرت من رفته بودم اونجا برای اینکه خودم یه عمل جراحی کوچیکی داشتم و بعدم فلینگرم پیش رفتم. فلینگرم خیلی اظهار ناراحتی کرد البته از این جریان و بعد گفت که اعلیحضرت وقتی که آمدن در همون 1968 من متوجه شدم که ممکن هستش که یک ناراحتی به وجود بیاد. من اعلیحضرت هیچی نگفتم، ولی به دو عیادی وقتی آمدم بیرون به عیادی گفتم که خوبه که اعلیحضرت بیشتر تحت معاینه باشن. چی کشف کرده بود ایشون که اونای دیگه در اون موقع کشف نکردن، یا اینکه با عیادی پشت و گوش انداخت موضوع رو.
On behalf of the Shahbanu, myself, and the Iranian people, I welcome.
Why does it matter when the Shah got sick? As the cornerstone of U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East, his mortality embodied the breakdown of American strategy for the future of the region.
Iran, because of the great leadership of the Shah is an island of stability in one of the more troubled areas of the world.
He chose to treat his own illness as a state secret. He kept it secret from his wife, from his own family. For 6 years, he had cancer. He did not tell his twin sister, Princess Ashraf, and he certainly didn't tell the United States. In fact, at one point, he misled American doctors who were examining his mother and asked about the family medical history.
He was under the opinion that Iranians, once they learn about his illness, would not be supportive of him as before.
The interesting part of understanding the psychology of the alpha person is that for every alpha person, there are people who really are, in a sense, conspiring against him. You can't have a leader without people wanting to be in his leadership position. And when a person starts to feel the weaknesses, when they start to feel things going wrong that they can't control, and by the way, control is an essential aspect of being an alpha person.
The man was getting sicker and sicker. I had a gentleman agreement with my beloved king. We never should lie to each other. I said to him, why did you ever didn't tell me? The answer was, if I have told you, you would have gone public. I said, 100%, I would. Your people have to know what you have. So they would have a sympathy for you. They would cry blood for you.
Those days, I had seen some symptoms of something unusual is going on.
The Queen recalls the unexpected decision by the Shah to involve her and their elder son, the Crown Prince, in meetings with the Prime Minister, Parliament, and chiefs of armed forces. She specifically mentions a visit in 1975 by the French president who expresses his surprise at the speed of growth in Iran. The Shah simply replies, "My problem is that I haven't enough time."
Since his illness, things changed. What we saw, which was unbelievable, was a man who was ordering arrest and imprisonment of some of the most loyal people to him.
Until Mr. Alam was alive, they couldn't do much. But after he died and the Shah became alone, you know, the Queen's influence increased tremendously.
On April 14, 1978, less than a year before the Iranian Revolution, Asadullah Alam, the Shah's most trusted advisor and friend, passed away. The cause of his death, ironically, was cancer of the blood. Alam's death, particularly dying of the same illness, immensely weakened the Shah, both physically and emotionally.
Basically, the Queen took over, and they always believed that the Shah is very much hated, the Queen is very much loved, and so if the Shah goes, they can take over, but and they never put any value on religion.
With the backing of a small obscure committee created to counsel the Queen a few years earlier, the ailing king's condition paved the way for the Empress Farah to begin making critical national decisions.
They released all the communists, all the prisoners, and they put their own people in jail. This is Mrs. Farah's doing.
I said, if you think this lady, that means our queen, or your son, could take your place, I'm sorry to say you're mistaken. If you go, everything would fall down. It probably would be blood in the streets. If you go, all the people who has served you with their heart and loyalty, they would be those who would not say good thing about it.
I think most of it was Queen and her entourage. I really think those days, those decisions were imposed on the Shah, and it wasn't him who had taken the initiative.
Betrayed by friends at home and abandoned by allies abroad, the Shah was faced with a country on the brink of collapse.
At the time that the Shah was meeting his new civilian government this past weekend, he was aware that the U.S. had made its decision. It was a subtle decision. It did not constitute a public disavowal of the Shah, nor in any way call for his abdication. The decision was simply to instruct U.S. Ambassador Sullivan that the next time the Shah asked for advice on whether or not to take a vacation, the advice should be, by all means, yes. This was done in the full knowledge that if the Shah leaves, he may never get back.
یک ماه قبل از چیز به من ایشون گفتن که من میخوام برم به آمریکا، میخوام برم وایت هاوس رو ببینم، میخوام برم نشنال سکیوریتی کانسل رو ببینم، میخوام برم با سنا صحبت کنم، میخوام برم با مجلس با اینا، میخوام برم با اینا صحبت کنم بگم که شما چی میخواید از ما، چی کار هست که ما نکردیم، چی کار هست که میخواید ما بکنیم برای شما، به ما بگید که ما به این وضع خاتمه بدیم، شما بگید یه راه حلی فکر کنید، وگرنه اگه ما بریم، اگه ایران بره یک خاورمیانه به هم خواهد خوردش، فقط راهنمایی بکنید ما رو، یا اینکه ایرادگیری بکنید یا پیشنهاد بکنید که چه کارهایی ما انجام بدیم.
America was indeed glad with the Shah's decision to depart the country and abandon his reign.
آقای سالیوان آمد و گفت آقای کارتر رئیس جمهور از اعلیحضرت خواهش کردند که اعلیحضرت در گوش بکنید درست در سر راه آمریکا، یعنی چی؟ یعنی داریم میریم آمریکا دیگه، در سر راه آمریکا اعلیحضرت در آسوان یه توقفی بکنن، فورد رئیس جمهور سابق آمریکا اونجا خواهد بود و با فورد و سادات اعلیحضرت 2 روز یه مذاکراتی راجع به کمپ دیوید در اونجا انجام دادن.
He was under the impression when he left Tehran that he was going to be going to the United States where living arrangements had already been arranged.
He should not have listened to the American or the British ambassador.
In January 16, 1979, the sick king and his family left Iran. Not trusting his pilot, the Shah himself flew the royal family 707 to Aswan, where he met his old friend, President Anwar Sadat. He received the royal treatment with a 21-gun salute and honor guard. But the king's mood was somber. It was a terrible day for the Shah, representing his entry into a life of exile. As the Shah stayed in a grand hotel suite on an island in the middle of the Nile River, back in Iran, people were on the streets in the millions, rejoicing in his departure and celebrating Khomeini's victorious return.
It is not known how long the Shah will stay in Egypt or when he will arrive in the United States. Early today, 3 of his children and his mother-in-law arrived in Texas, near Lubbock, to join the Shah's son there. It is believed that the Shah and his family will take up temporary sanctuary in the Palm Springs, California estate of publisher Walter Annenberg, where the Shah's sister and mother now are staying.
The Shah had lost his throne, but the crisis of Iran was just beginning.
He remained in Egypt only for about 5 days. It's interesting that Dr. Flandrin came to Aswan to do a blood count on him.
The illness still remained a guarded secret. His travel plans to the U.S. were about to change.
بعد من تلفن کردم به سفیر آمریکا در مصر، گفتم ما میخوایم بیاییم، به ما گفتن که با هواپیما با اندروز ایرفورس بیس بیاییم، چه ساعتی و چه روزی بیاییم. اون گفت که من تلفن میکنم به شما میگم. و بعد فرداش تلفن کرد از قاهره به آسوان به من، گفتش که شما لطفا به اعلیحضرت بگید که من با آمریکا تماس گرفتم. ادمنستریشن آمریکا در حال حاضر صلاح نمیدونه اعلیحضرت به آمریکا بیاد.
Lured out of Iran, the Shah was told he could no longer stay in Egypt. His presence there was creating complications for the Sadat regime amongst Arab Muslims. But where would he go? Few countries were willing to welcome the fallen monarch. King Hassan of Morocco temporarily admitted the Shah as a favor to the US. The Shah's 2-month stay in Morocco began on a positive note. He was reunited with the royal family. The king's illness was still being kept secret from the media.
He went to Morocco where he had some comfortable quarters, but on February the 14th, 1979, there was a mob that went into the American embassy.
Khomeini's followers in Iran, fearing a repeat of the Shah's return to power, stormed the American embassy. Negotiations between the Carter administration and the Iranian moderates produced a tentative de-escalation of the situation. But President Carter was put on notice for the first time and knew from this point on that allowing the Shah into the U.S. would cause harm for U.S. personnel stationed in Iran.
With that trouble in Tehran, the government of Morocco and King Hassan felt very uncomfortable in him staying in Morocco and asked him to leave. But where was he going to go? Nobody wanted to take him. They were afraid of reprisals. And finally, with the intervention of the Princess Ashraf, his twin sister, and Henry Kissinger, and David Rockefeller, they prevailed upon the government of the Bahamas.
Powerful friends were able to get the Shah and his entourage temporary safe haven in the Bahamas. Exorbitant sums were charged for the royal stay. The king and queen did not enjoy their new residence. Their quarters were cramped and afforded little privacy. The Shah swam in the tropical waters and took strolls down the beach, but his health was continually deteriorating. Rockefeller employee Robert Armeo was sent to the Bahamas. From there on, Armeo would become the king's main advisor, handler, spokesman, and chief of staff. Blue skies and clear waters did not change the fact that the Shah was sick.
Dr. Flandrin came to see him in the Bahamas, and that was the first time that the Shah's illness seemed to become more severe.
Apparently, while he was in the Bahamas, he had developed a lymph node in his neck, and they had done a needle biopsy and had made a diagnosis of Hodgkin's disease. And needle biopsies are really not a good way to make a primary diagnosis of lymphoma. They had contended that it was because of the nature of secrecy that they were not able to get a genuine biopsy, an excisional biopsy. I find that a little hard to believe because taking a lymph node out from the neck is a rather simple procedure.
I was surprised that the French hematologist was treating the Shah for a hematologic problem, malignant problem, without a proper diagnosis and in secret. Giving him chemotherapy without a tissue diagnosis, that's a mistake.
The disease, which had previously been a more benign cancer in 1974, was becoming more malignant and required more active treatment, preferably in a hospital.
They thought that he had a lymphoproliferative disorder and now a low-grade lymph malignancy of non-Hodgkin's variety, and now they thought he had Hodgkin's disease.
He's now instead of being chronic lymphatic leukemia, had turned into a large cell lymphoma, which is a more dangerous and a disease with a much more serious outcome.
Chronic lymphocytic leukemia is a type of cancer that starts with certain white blood cells in the bone marrow. These cancer cells travel from the marrow into the blood. The size of the cancer cells is one classification system for lymphoma.
Certainly, I would not have accepted a needle biopsy as the basis for treating someone.
After a couple of months, the British government decided that the Shah was no longer welcome in the Bahamas.
He was like a citizen without a country. And with a lot of diplomatic maneuvering through David Rockefeller and through Henry Kissinger, the Mexican government and the President of Mexico, Lopez Portillo, agreed to have the Shah come to Mexico.
But why Mexico? It was the closest destination to the U.S.
That was a good place because they didn't need oil from Iran. They didn't have really any political interests in the region that were very important to them.
They arranged to have him live in a comfortable villa in the resort town of Cuernavaca. At this point, he began to have many, many doctors. There were doctors in Mexico who saw him, Dr. Flandrin who came to see him.
I think it was in the middle of October when somebody from the U.S. Embassy called me. There was an important fellow in Cuernavaca, and they were not giving me the name. They were just an important who had a problem with jaundice and abdominal pain. That was all I was told.
And the American government, through David Rockefeller, sent down another doctor, a Dr. Benjamin Keene, an internist and a specialist in tropical diseases from New York. But he thought he was being called down to see the Shah because he had malaria.
When David Rockefeller came and he saw that Shah was sick, he was jaundice, and somebody mentioned malaria, he went back to New York and he sent his tropical medicine expert.
Ben Keene went down there and thought that what they were thinking was malaria was really platelets, which is a blood clotting element.
We're a malaria-free country since the early 60s.
As the royal family bid their time in Cuernavaca, hoping for an invitation to the U.S., the Shah was visited by an old friend, President Richard Nixon.
If the United States does not stand by its friends, we are going to end up with no friends.
He had an obstruction in the liver or the common bile duct, probably due to a stone or due to malignancy. Well, that was the first time that there began to be a serious disagreement among the doctors.
Dr. Keene is a parasitologist. He wasn't really a hematologist or an oncologist.
I have no idea why a tropical medicine expert had anything to do with somebody with gallstones, but that's the way the politicians were handling the problem.
The Queen's memoirs describe the arrival of Dr. Keene as the start of a period of diagnostic cacophony, which transpired into a chain of critical disasters. Dr. Keene, on the other hand, depicted the Shah as a difficult and secretive patient for refusing to provide blood samples and withholding critical information about his illness.
Ben had worked with the Rockefellers for a number of years, and that the Rockefellers were good friends of the Shah, and they implored him to bring him to New York.
The Mexican doctors felt that they could treat the Shah in Mexico. They had the facilities at their hospital.
We had the best private hospital in Mexico. We had the facilities to do the diagnosis. We had the facilities to perform surgery.
Dr. Flandrin initially thought that the Shah could be treated in Mexico.
He inspects the hospital in Mexico City and gives a favorable report to Armeo, who responds to Dr. Flandrin, "For a patient like His Majesty, this is not enough. We have to go for the best, and only the United States can provide the best."
And apparently, Dr. Keene thought the Mexican facilities were inadequate.
Dr. Keene, the only American physician to have personally examined the Shah, was at this point in direct talks with State Department's chief medical officer, Dr. Ibn Dustin. Recalling these events in his book, Dr. Keene highlights 5 distinct conditions, all demanding immediate treatment. The Shah's cancer and enlarged spleen were included in the report. Answering the question of how much time the Shah has, Dr. Keene reiterates, "Days, maybe weeks, we do not have months." When asked if he can treat the Shah in Mexico, Dr. Keene replies, "Not as easily or as quickly, but it could be done."
I was in Washington, D.C. I visited the State Department, then having dinner with Dr. Ibn Dustin. We're talking about the facilities for operating in Mexico, and I said, we had everything ready at the ABC hospital. According to him, we were ready to bring him over. And then all of a sudden, he was called over the phone, and "You have a CT scan in Mexico?" I said, "No, we don't have, but we don't need it. We can make a diagnosis with regular ultrasound," which we did at the time for everybody with gallstones. We always use ultrasound. And then he went back to the phone, and that was it.
And I have no idea if the Shah ever made a decision himself. He took Dr. Keene's word for most of the things.
But at that time, when this happened, I had already done 2 operations. I had operated on 2 ambassadors to the U.S. So they knew that I was a board-certified surgeon, and I had been trusted to operate on the U.S. ambassador to Mexico. What more proof of confidence you needed?
I felt that, and so did Henry Kissinger, who also know him and worked with me on this. We worked together. We felt that at the very least, he should be invited to find refuge in the United States.
And what about the Rockefellers? What was their interest in the Shah's affairs? Chase Manhattan Bank, which was owned by the Rockefellers and on whose board Henry Kissinger sat, was the exclusive bank to the Shah's government. The main accounts for the Central Bank of Iran, as well as the National Iranian Oil Company, were held at Chase.
President Carter was very reluctant to admit the Shah because he knew all the possibilities. He was alerted by his own people.
But even though I don't think he was convinced, he thought, well, if everyone else is pushing this, then perhaps it's the best thing to do. Maybe I'm not seeing something that should be seen in this situation, and I'm not going to hold out forever against my top advisors who are all now advising me to do the opposite.
But then he was forced to. They tell you cannot abandon a friend. We put him in power. He's sick. In Mexico, they don't know how to do things.
What force could possibly influence a standing U.S. president to go against his own best judgment and acquiesce?
One of the items that I don't think is well known, or I certainly learned in the process of my research, was that the embassy had already been overrun 3 times before the one that is so famous where the hostages were actually taken and kept.
We came under very heavy attack from 2 or 3 sides of the compound, and a group of very well-equipped armed men came in here, shot up my house and occupied it, shot up the embassy, Chancery. We telephoned to the security committee with the Khomeini group. They managed to send a group of people here just in the nick of time because we had abandoned the ground floor and we're all on the upper floor by the time these lads came, these freedom fighters, and they apparently routed the others and saved us.
I didn't realize this was the fact, and I think a lot of Americans didn't, that Carter was very concerned about our embassy personnel.
The treatment was delayed, and after several months in Mexico, the Shah was flown to the United States, to New York Hospital.
The Carter administration did a humanitarian thing and let him in. And then all the trouble started.
The Shah was granted entry to the U.S. based on Mexico lacking the necessary doctors and equipment to do the surgery.
He arrived in New York Hospital, had a CAT scan or ultrasound investigation. It was determined that he had a common bile duct stone, which was obstructing his common bile duct.
The gallbladder, a small pear-shaped organ, holds a digestive fluid called bile. Hardened deposits of digestive fluid, which form in the gallbladder, create gallstones and can block the bile duct. This obstruction can result in various complications, the most common being jaundice.
Dr. King wanted the Shah to have the most famous surgeon for gallbladder problem in the U.S. at that time, Dr. Frank Glenn, to do the operation. And of course, he didn't do it. They sent somebody else.
It was actually his trainee and student.
Dr. Glenn was my mentor, was my teacher, who was retired.
The operation was actually done by Dr. Bjorn Thorbjornersen.
I was in my office. It was across the street from the New York hospital. I got a call from Dr. Hibbert Williams. He told me he had a patient with common duct stones and asked me whether I would consult on him and take care of the problems. I went over to the hospital and saw him. He told me the patient was the Shah of Iran, who had been admitted to the hospital the day before under an alias.
Armeo, annoyed by the Undersecretary of State's unwillingness to allow the Shah entry into the U.S., arranges for New York Hospital to admit the ill king under his very name, David Newsom.
Went into the room. Shah sat up and shook my hand and said that he was glad to have me take care of him, since I was the doctor that other doctors came to for their own care. Where he got that information from, I have no idea.
The patient was not informed of who was going to operate on him.
What drove me absolutely crazy was that Ben Keen, and I don't know what his agenda was, would never let me know in advance of what was going on.
The oncologist who was engaged in New York Hospital apparently did not even know that the Shah was being operated on.
We discussed the case and what we should do, and I was looking at some of the records and I noticed that he had a big spleen, and it kept bugging me and bugging me and bugging me. And everyone said, well, you know, we got to take care of this gallbladder first. So here I have a spleen that I don't know what's in there. And I need to know what's in that spleen, because I know he's got lymphoma up at his neck, which would make him localized lymphoma. But if he has it in his spleen, this large cell lymphoma, this high-grade disease as opposed to low-grade disease, then I wouldn't have irradiated him. I would have given him chemotherapy.
The day of operation was the next morning. The administration arranged to give me the early time. It was 8 o'clock, I believe it was.
I drove in the next morning, determined to meet with the people and say, we need to take out the spleen. I show up, and I'm told that he's in the operating room. And I ran up to the operating room, knocked on the door.
Stuck his head into the operating room and said, why don't you remove the spleen at the same while you're doing it?
I was furious. Had I been told that they were going to go to surgery, instead of showing up at 8 o'clock in the morning, I would have showed up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I'd say, fellas, let's take out the spleen.
The surgeon didn't want to take out the spleen. He said, if you want to take out the spleen,
you're a braver man than I.
I was doing a semi-emergency operation. I did not have the Shah's permission to take out the spleen. I had never talked to him. We had never talked to him about the need for taking out the spleen.
Finally, the long-awaited operation took place. In New York Hospital, the place where, according to Armeo and Keene, it could only be done best.
The operation went well. Removed the gallbladder, removed the stones from the lower end of the common duct without any problem at all. Removed all the other stones in the lower end of the common duct.
A tube was inserted into the bile duct, and the abdomen was closed at that time without a splenectomy.
The Shah kept asking me, after he had waken up from his operation, how sure I was that there were no stones left in the biliary tree. I told him that I did not think there was any.
Of course, one gallstone was left in.
The Shah's simple and routine operation, handled by the trainee, ended up with complications.
The Shah went to the operating room because he had obstruction, bile duct obstruction. He was jaundiced. After the operation, he continued jaundice. So the problem was there. The gallbladder was removed, but the stones that were blocking the duct were there.
I felt a little bit uneasy about the fact that the left hepatic stone had not come out as an identifiable stone, but both the scoping and the x-rays failed to show any remaining stones, so there was nothing else we could do.
And he didn't do the right operation. The right operation is remove the gallbladder and open the bile duct and do a cholangiogram. That means x-rays in the operating room.
X-rays done in the operating room were never of the best quality. They are done through a portable machine and lack the fine definition that you do in the regular X-ray.
New York Hospital, one of the best medical centers in the U.S., don't kid me. And the equipment to do the operative cholangiogram is not good. That's nonsense.
So they called a specialist from British Columbia
called Dr. Burheen from Vancouver
to come in to remove the stone through the tube.
Which he did successfully.
As the Queen said, he got the worst possible treatment.
On November 3rd, there was a medical news conference in New York discussing the Shah's health. Cancer was the main topic.
His Imperial Majesty Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi was admitted to New York Hospital on Monday evening, October 22nd, with the diagnosis of lymphoma, for which he has been treated for approximately 6 years by a team of renowned French physicians.
The medical secret the Shah had tried so hard to keep, even from his own people, was let out on a global stage.
So at the news conference, they're not interested in gallstones. What they were interested in, of course, was his lymphoma. I'm going to this news conference. I don't know whether he's got stage 1 disease, whether he's got stage 3 disease. And I'm sort of in a quandary, and I don't want to release too much information. People are saying, well, he may, if you say too much, he may want to go back one day to take over Iran, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, we know at least that it's in his lymph nodes and his neck and in his spleen. I think most chemotherapists and throughout the world would assume that this is considered relatively widespread lymphoma.
But I said at the news conference, if you need chemotherapy, good medical practice would suggest that you stay near your doctors. And someone asked me, how long was the therapy? And I said,
I don't make political decisions, but if I had to make a medical decision, I would insist on his being in the United States as if he's under my care for the next 6 months, at least. Or perhaps a year and a half.
The next day, November 4th, after hearing the Shah was to stay in America for 6 months or more, Iranian students stormed the U.S. Embassy in Tehran for the final time and held U.S. citizens and diplomats captive.
The American Embassy in Tehran is in the hands of Muslim students tonight.
I have received assurances that they will be kept safe and well.
The administration's problem is no one knows whom to blame for the takeover of the embassy.
In fact, I was accused by one wag that said I was responsible for the capture of the U.S. Embassy, because when they heard I said 6 months, they thought there was going to be 6 months of conspiracies going on in the United States to put the Shah back into control, and they took over the embassy.
So why did Carter allow the Shah to enter the U.S. when he knew Americans would be held hostage in Iran?
There's an interview on Meet the Press where he describes before allowing the Shah in, going to the Iranian government and getting their assurance that they would step in because he assumed at that point the embassy would be overrun, which I didn't realize until looking into this further, that he thought, well, certainly this will happen again. And can you guarantee me that my Americans will be safe? And they assured him that they would step in, and then for the first time in history, they didn't.
شما می‌بینید که الان مرکز فساد امریکا را جوان‌ها رفتن گرفتن و امریکایی هم که در اونجا بوده گرفتن و اون لانه فساد را به دست آوردن و امریکا هم هیچ غلطی نمی‌تونه بکنه.
The taking of U.S. hostages conveniently gave President Carter justification to evoke the Emergency Economic Powers Act. Iranian assets were frozen, and sanctions were placed on the government of Iran that still stand today. The sanctions did nothing but anger the hostage takers, though by this time, the ball was certainly in their court.
ما از اقتصادی نمی ترسیم. ما از دخالت نظامی نمی ترسیم. اون چیزی که ما را می ترساند وابستگی فرهنگی است.
The Iranians set out their conditions for the release of the hostages.
They wanted a public apology from the United States about meddling in its domestic affairs and a commitment not to do so in the future, and then they wanted the Shah returned for trial.
These are the four conditions: an unfreezing of assets, Iranian assets, by the United States, a canceling of claims against Iran by the United States, the return of the Shah's wealth, and a pledge of non-interference by the United States in Iranian internal affairs, with the stipulation that all four conditions must be fulfilled. That word is fulfilled, and not merely accepted by the United States to win the release of the hostages.
But the Iranian assets were spread all over the place. The Federal Reserve had a big chunk of the frozen Iranian assets, $1.3 billion in securities and another $1 billion worth in gold. This was the easiest to get back since it was under government control. The U.S. Treasury also had Iranian assets, $400 million worth on deposits for American military equipment that was paid for by the Shah but never delivered. This sum is the source of the controversial payments made to the Islamic government of Iran by the Obama administration. Financial institutions in this country also had a lot of Iranian money, more than $1 billion worth. Most of it was immediately taken by the banks to offset loans made to the Shah that weren't being paid. Foreign branches of American banks had the largest amount, $4 billion worth, mostly held at the Chase Manhattan London branch. Freezing that money was especially contentious because European banking laws did not allow the government freezing of assets to offset business losses. Finally, U.S. corporations had frozen Iranian money, $500 million worth, which Iran never gained access to. As for outstanding loans or claims against the frozen assets, they totaled nearly $10 billion. That's roughly $50 billion in today's dollars, but no one knew for sure. The Shah's wealth was the second part of the financial deal to get the hostages back. The Islamic government wanted that money too. By some estimates, it ranged in the billions of dollars. With only about a tenth of that physically located in this country, the U.S. had no legal right to touch that money. The financial aspects of the hostage crisis were never publicly discussed. There were at least 275 lawsuits aimed at getting Iranian money.
The United States government at that time was convinced that the Shah had to leave the United States, and I think the Shah himself said to ensure the fact that the hostages were not endangered, he knew that he had to leave.
They told him, "You are not welcome anymore. Your visa has expired."
Frantically, they began to look for another place that he might go. Again, that where came up, and again the delay in treatment.
The Shah thought he would be allowed back in Mexico.
Mexican people told President Lopez Portillo, if we are not good to treat him, we are not good to rescue him.
The risk posed by the Shah's presence in the U.S. was such that President Carter sent his chief of staff, Hamilton Jordan, in an exhaustive search for possible countries to admit the Shah.
They began negotiations with Panama, but in the meantime, they decided that he should go to an air base in Texas, where he and the Queen were allowed to establish their quarters.
The transfer from New York to Lackland was arranged under tight security. The confined quarters of the psychiatric wing of the military base finally generated a vocal complaint by the Queen. Ironically, the ill treatment and misdiagnosis of the Shah up to that point or afterwards did not warrant such an outward display from her.
But meanwhile, the spleen became larger, the blood count became worse, and it was evident that his spleen had to come out.
The main concern was to get the Shah out of the U.S. Then they want the Iranians to keep the words of killing one American every 24 hours.
Arrangements were made to fly him to Panama with his entourage, and he was flown to Contadora Island.
The Shah was let in with the understanding that the reason for his visit was medical and for humanitarian purposes only. After the taking of the American hostages, medical or humanitarian grounds did not warrant his presence in the U.S. With his pride injured, the fallen monarch arrived in Panama City and was flown by helicopter to the Pacific resort island of Contadora, 35 miles southwest of the capital. The king and queen found comfortable respite in the vacation home of former Panamanian ambassador to the United States.
He was given refuge in Panama because the Americans couldn't find any place to send him. And you remember that Carter and Torrijos signed the Canal Treaty. So General Torrijos felt he owed Carter a favor. And that was the favor that was done, was to accept the Shah in Panama.
Diplomats speculate that Washington wants the Shah to remain here in Panama until the hostage question is settled.
We were informed by Dr. Carlos Garcia that the Shah was going to have an operation because Dr. Garcia and Dr. Adan Rios, had been taking care of the Shah, and his blood count was very low, and that he needed to have his spleen out because it was destroying his blood cells.
Dr. Keene came down and initially thought that he would be treated at Gorgas Hospital, which was in the Panama Canal zone and was an American administrated hospital. The Panamanians felt that he could be treated as well as in a Panamanian hospital.
And so the next morning they called the Gorgas Army Hospital director and asked for the Shah to be transferred. Of course, it was denied because the American government did not want the Shah anywhere near any American facility or any American doctor or anything that smelled USA to protect the hostages in Tehran.
We were so shocked by this question of hostages that I even volunteered to leave a New York hospital when I was under treatment to eventually help solve this problem. And this time...
In Panama, they wanted to do the surgery. And the physician in Panama wanted to do that. They asked, let us do it. But Ashraf, his sister, he said, no, I want an American physician to do this.
We had prepared to do the surgery on a Sunday morning, very early. Also, we had negotiated through the American Embassy and the U.S. Army to have a blood separator sent to Panama. At that time, that was a very new type of equipment with Dr. Gene Hester, who was a hematologist in Houston. And they had about 10 U.S. soldiers of his blood type set up there, just fresh blood.
The aim was processing large volumes of normal donor blood to collect and concentrate sufficient granulocytes for replacement therapy on leukemia patients. a technique Dr. Hester had been involved in developing since the early 70s.
So we seem to have everything going very well. When all of a sudden we got an article from New York where Dr. Keene had stated that Shah would be admitted that weekend to a Panamanian hospital for a splenectomy. And then on Wednesday, Dr. DeBakey made a statement to the press that he was coming because nobody in Panama knew how to take care of a spleen.
Dr. Keene decided that Dr. DeBakey should be the surgeon rather than the Panamanian surgeon. But Dr. DeBakey was not a spleen surgeon. He was a very noted and deservedly noted cardiovascular surgeon, world famous.
They just went by the name. They just went for the prestige. They just go for the, you know what? My gallbladder was took out by DeBakey.
Typical Ben Keene. I'm going to get the biggest name I can get. That's pure and simple Ben Keene.
I said, for God's sake, why they chose him? He's not the man for this procedure, just like that. But I knew that nobody going to tell him, you know what, Dr. DeBakey, please don't go. This is not your job.
Why you being in that position, you accept to go to a different country, which is not a good idea, to do an operation that you haven't done maybe in 30 years or 40. He was a big man in abdominal surgery in the 40s. And then in the 60s, he became one of the top surgeons in cardiovascular surgery.
Now, a good cardiac surgeon can do abdominal surgery, but why not get a guy who does splenectomies all the time?
Dr. Keene says in his book that he had a brainstorm and called Dr. DeBakey because Dr. DeBakey had operated on many world celebrities, and the Shah deserved a celebrity surgeon.
Dr. DeBakey was under the impression that he had been hired by Ben Keene and probably Rockefeller to come to Panama to do this surgery. And he's such a famous man that he thought that, all the doors would be open to him right away, and that wasn't the way the U.S. Embassy and our government had planned it, because he's not allowed to practice in Panama. He's not a Panamanian. But our government issued a special ruling saying that he could work as an observer and a consultant to our team.
And with all those fanfare and noise, Dr. DeBakey comes to Panama. I come here to operate on the Shah. How do you feel if you were a Panamanian surgeon?
We had told Dr. Keene that he was welcome to join our team. What happened was he got off the plane with his team.
There was a certain arrogance there. I think they felt they had been upended all this time.
No surgeon with self-respect will allow himself to let somebody from another country come and do the operation for him. If you're in charge, there's only can be one chief, one captain of the ship.
Dr. Keene was furious. I said, Dr. Garcia de Paredes, but Dr. DeBakey goes all over the world operating on people. And I told him, this is not Afghanistan,
Settled on a miniature chair in a foreign land, far removed from the peacock throne, once again, the king's indecisiveness had created a vacuum for others to make important decisions about his affairs.
And it went back and forth between Dr. Flandrin, DeBakey, Keene, the Panamanian surgeons, to where would the operation take place and who would do it, when it would be done. Meanwhile, the spleen was getting worse.
Dr. Keene told the Shah in Panama that he didn't want to have the operation in Panama because he didn't trust the Panamanian surgeons.
And he was afraid that the Iranians would pay General Torrijos for us to kill him during the surgery. And General Torrijos had told us, if the Shah dies, you're all going to jail.
And Ben Keene was there manipulating all the way around.
That in terms of the facilities that I found there, I recommended that the operation not be done there because I felt it would increase the risk.
And Dr. DeBakey never even went to see our operating rooms or any installation in the hospital. He just came and we met in the library, and that's where we had our meeting. That's the only time he was in our hospital. How can he say all these things? He never even walked in to see our recovery rooms or anything.
Meanwhile, the government of Iran had arranged for a lawyer from France to come to Panama City to arrange for the extradition or the arrest of the Shah.
I believe that the Republic of Panama has sort of is trying to contribute to the peaceful solution to the whole crisis.
And one of the General Torrijos, very, very important consultants and assistants, went to Tehran.
Adding to the failing health, the Shah now had an extradition and a possible firing squad in Iran hanging over his neck.
And when I interviewed the Panamanian lawyer Juan Materno Vasquez, who had been a Supreme Court judge, and he told me, you know, we had arranged to have the Shah placed under house arrest, to have the trial, to have the hostages immediately transferred to the Swiss embassy, and once the trial was over, they would be released. On the Saturday, the two lawyers from the Iranian government arrived in Panama. They were going to place in our courts the file for extradition on the Monday, and he left on a Sunday, the day before.
Queen Farah called her friend in Egypt, the wife of Sadat, and she said, "Come to Egypt."
Relieved to be escaping Panama and Torrijos, the Shah declined Sadat's offer of the use of the presidential plane. Instead, for his trip to Egypt, he follows American advice in chartering an Evergreen jet, a former CIA operative airliner. As soon as the Shah's plane left the tarmac, Hamilton Jordan and the Carter administration made one last effort to negotiate the freedom of the hostages via the French lawyer Bourget in extraditing the Shah. Khomeini had made it clear to his people that he did not want the Shah to reach Egypt. As a final sign of appeasement, the Americans forced an unscheduled landing of the Shah's plane in the small Portuguese island of Azores in the Atlantic for alleged refueling. Hamilton Jordan and his counterpart Qutbzadeh continued discussing the Shah's fate. Everything was in place for a new extradition process. But at the last minute, Qutbzadeh informs Jordan that the deal was not approved. The negotiations fell apart. After a 6-hour delay, the sick, feverish king was allowed to proceed, oblivious to the danger that had just passed, and helpless in stopping what was about to come.
Will the Shah be staying in Egypt?
We'll have ample time.
Yes, he's permanent.
We'll have ample time after the operation to speak with you, gentlemen and ladies.
You will stay here permanently, sir?
Yes.
President Sadat and his wife were there to greet the Shah and his queen. They were very amazed at how wan and thin the Shah looked.
The Shah had nowhere else to go. One way or another, Egypt would be his final stop.
Dr. DeBakey came 3 days later, ready for operation. And the splenectomy was scheduled and done. It took about 80 minutes. Spleen came out easily. And shortly after the operation, the Shah looked quite well.
So in effect what you're saying is that the operation for the removal of the spleen went well, and if he now continues to respond to chemotherapy, he will continue to live at a fairly normal rate.
Exactly, and he's done extremely well following the operation. Really, I think his progress has been much more rapid than we had hoped for.
Dr. DeBakey was awarded an Order of the Egyptian Empire by President Sadat for his operation. But within a couple of weeks, the Shah began to have pain in his chest, developed fevers, chill, and he was not doing well.
Oh, it happened, the most famous surgeon in the world hadn't done a splenectomy in 40 years.
Dr. DeBakey had decided to leave his patient without a drain.
You drain it?
Oh, definitely. I would have put a drain in because there was a hole that we're leaving. The spleen was about that big.
Usually when we do a splenectomy, especially in cases like this, we leave a drain to make sure that everything is able to drain out which doesn't belong there, especially since there's a very close relationship to the pancreas.
The pancreas is the thing you have to pay a good deal of attention to when you do a splenectomy. The tail of the pancreas, the end of the pancreas, is usually intimately stuck into what we call the hilum or the spleen.
Any surgical teaching tells you that when you go in there to remove a spleen, you have to take extreme care to avoid damaging the pancreas.
The specimen from the Egypt operation ended up in the New York hospital.
And the pathologist who received the spleen, they found a piece of the pancreas. That's bad surgery.
An avoidable injury to the pancreas caused by the carelessness of his surgeon is added to the Shah's list of complications.
So I fly into Egypt and I see the Shah and I speak to the Egyptian doctors and they tell me that he nicked the pancreas and he was running fever. I said, you must start him on intravenous antibiotics. They said, His Majesty doesn't want intravenous antibiotics. He wants oral antibiotics. I said, I don't care what His Majesty wants. I'm telling you, you've got to give him intravenous antibiotics.
In this most crucial juncture in the Shah's health, the sole medical decision maker and self-professed doctor to the Shah, Ben Keane, suddenly leaves the scene and returns to New York. In his absence, Flandrin observes that no one is inclined to accept the diagnosis of subphrenic abscess, not even Dr. Coleman.
I was worried to death that he had a subphrenic abscess. And DeBakey called and assured me, he went back to see him, he says he does not have a subphrenic abscess. Now he was on steroids. They put him on steroids, which masks, this is not what you do. I mean, it masks an acute abdomen.
When the Shah developed a subphrenic abscess after the splenectomy, that was due to a splenic injury that was not recognized.
Conflicting reports are coming out of Cairo, Egypt, on the health of the deposed Shah of Iran. The newspaper Al Aram says his condition is deteriorating, but his doctor says he's better, and official spokesman Robert Omeo seems optimistic.
The fever and the infection is being dealt with antibiotics. That normally is a slow process, but the doctors tell me it's moving along.
Well, now, of course, the spleen is removed, his blood has returned to normal, the bone marrow is normal in its activity, and they can resume the chemotherapy that they've been using.
When Dr. DeBakey said he did not have a subphrenic abscess, he was not operated on, but he got worse and worse. His fevers got higher and higher. Pain got worse and worse.
His ego would not let him to admit.
According to Dr. DeBakey's account, the Shah's bone marrow and blood were back to normal, to the point that he was ready to continue chemotherapy.
Now, the gold standard therapy at that time was CHOP, and we had developed a therapy called COPLAM. And you use many of the same drugs, but the dosing is different. They're all the good standard therapy, but you cannot mix the two. And if I remember correctly, the Egyptians tried to mix the two.
At this stage, a massive infection caused by Dr. DeBakey's splenectomy, his negligence in not leaving a drain, injuring the pancreas, using steroids, which mask the infection, the mixing of chemo drugs, and 2 months' delay in treating the subphrenic abscess are the main reasons for the Shah's deteriorating health, and not his cancer.
And finally, Dr. Flandrin called a specialist in France by the name of Dr. Fagnier, who specialized, strangely enough, in complications of surgery, to come to Egypt and operate on the Shah.
They had to call a French surgeons to go and do a correct problem. It's sad.
And what I heard later from one of the Egyptian doctors was they were really very upset with the French. And they told Sadat about it, and Sadat, being a clever man, came over and saw the Shah. And he said to the Egyptian doctors, "Can't you see this man is dying?" He said, "Let them take the heat for it."
Dr. Fagnier operated on the Shah almost immediately, drained the subphrenic abscess, and then he drained approximately 1.5 liters of pus. But he had really suffered from this infection for a long time. And in July of 1980, he finally lapsed into a coma and died. I think that he suffered for much too long with a subphrenic abscess. Could have been drained a long time before that. But because there were too many doctors involved, too many interpretations, he endured much too much for too long.
The whole thing is a book of malpractice from the point of view of hematology, oncology, surgery, handling the complications.
What happened here is you had too many cooks spoiling the broth. Now, there were huge political ramifications, but you got to have a captain at the helm, and a captain at the helm whose only agenda is to get that patient better.
It's sad that a person with so much power, so much money, couldn't get the care that he needed because of his political needs and the political situation of the American government and the Iranian government and everybody else involved.
Through what seemed to be some small medical decisions, that it changed the consequences of that revolution in U.S. relationships with that part of the world. It wasn't so much, I think, the death of the Shah as it was the way his health issues were handled.
The Shah got into a position of where he was almost never seeing the reality of his sickness, of his relationships, of his positions, of the people who were taking care of him. And it had to result in a personal disaster for him.
Mohammad Reza Pahlavi died on the morning of July 27, 1980, at 9:50 a.m., aged 60 years old. He was buried at the Al-Rifai Mosque in Cairo, the same mausoleum where years earlier his predecessor and father, Reza Shah, was initially buried in exile. On January 16, 1979, the Shah left Iran for the last time. 10 days prior to his departure, the heads of the four great Western powers, United States, Britain, Germany, and France, met in the small Caribbean island of Guadeloupe to decide the future of the King of Kings and his nation, Iran. After all, this was the year their oil contracts were to expire.
در این موقع آقای ژیسکار دستان وارد میشه میگه که نه دیگه تمام شد عمر شاه روزهای شاه شمرده شده و راه مرض سرطان داره و شاه خواهد رفت باید به فکر یه چیز دیگه بکنیم. آقای ژیسکار دستان اطلاع حاصل کرده بودش از بیماری اعلیحضرت به طور خیلی محرمانه از همین آقای برنارد میدونید.
Lord David Owen, then British Foreign Secretary, writes that after leaving office, the French foreign minister told him that the French were indeed aware of the Shah's diagnosis. President Carter involved himself in an unsteady game of musical allies and facilitated the toppling of the already unstable monarch in favor of political Islam. This was all achieved under the banner of democracy, human rights, and the Iranian people's right to self-determination. But for Carter and the US, there was blowback. The president was also consumed in the inferno more than any of his co-conspirators from Guadeloupe.
Students think that Iran is our enemy because they're building nuclear weapons. And I find that interesting. And a lot of it stems as well from George W. Bush's speech in the Axis of Evil. And so many, for the year after that at least, maybe even longer, every time those three countries were mentioned, the Axis of Evil was put right next to it. So that you get these kids at very impressionable ages who just think they've always been our enemy. They had no idea that we were ever allies. They had no idea that there was something particular, that there was a set of decisions made during a very brief period of time that have led us to where we are now with these decades now of sanctions that have affected our relationships, well, and Iran's relationship with the rest of the world, for that matter.
The Carter administration failed to grasp the real meaning of political Islam. Fast forward 30 years later, President Barack Obama followed the line of his predecessor, Jimmy Carter, in trying to reforge a path of reconciliation between the US and political Islam in Iran. Relations with Iran were the one legacy President Obama pursued vigorously to all ends. But at what price? The price of democracy, the price of human rights, and the price of the Iranian people's right to self-determination? The same idealism and naivety that brought down the Carter presidency can no longer touch President Obama. However, the impact of his decision to negotiate with the Shia Islamic clergy that hold actual power in Iran, or President Trump's willingness to further pursue this path, will be the real legacy left behind for future generations.